Welcome to the UST Education recorded webinar series. This session is powered by US Transactions. UST is a boutique payment processing firm providing you with personalized service. We offer agnostic, best-fit technology solutions for associations, nonprofits, and enterprise clients.
That works. We just did some mental athletic training with Chester Santos, who has the best memory in the United States.
Just with ease. Joining us right now is memory expert and winner of the 2008 USA National Memory Championship, Chester Santos.
Chester, you have trouble remembering names, faces, where you maybe put your coffee cup? Well, if you do, Chester Santos, he can help. He's a 2008 National Memory Champion. He's here to help us.
Certainly knows he does. Chester Santos is the United States Memory Champion. He captured the title this past weekend in New York City. There he is accepting the prize. He's now
you can count or see. He's got the names of every congressman and senator seen. Stack a decade ways from Sunday. He'll get it every time the international.
Who's the 12th District New Jersey Congressman?
Rush Holt. Okay.
Rush Holt.
In the games you play, he's got the corner wrapped up in his steel trap.
10 of hearts.
Three to go.
2 of clubs.
Yes.
Jack of diamonds.
You got it.
And 3 of diamonds.
Unbelievable.
That's incredible. First of all,
Can't get enough of this amazing feats. He's got the memory down to every single.
We have Carol, Rick, Pedro, Jack, Andy.
Dazzles the crowds from Berlin to Dubai with dizzying acts every single time. He's got the power to educate, the power to thrill and memorize. All wrapped up in his insatiable mind. Just a transform. He's one of a kind. He's your man. He's your champion.
Some of his techniques stretch all the way back to the ancient Greeks. But what's amazing is that standing in front of you as a modern human being, I can still feel those techniques reprogramming my brain to remember things better.
All right. Thank you for the intro, Nicole. Thank you, everybody, for having me today as your speaker. My name is Chester Santos, also known as the International Man of Memory. After winning the United States National Memory Championship, I've gone on to give presentations in more than 30 different countries on how anyone can develop powerful memory skills and leverage those skills for more success professionally, personally, and also academically. If you happen to have any kids or grandkids in school, what we cover today in terms of professional development will be very useful to share with them. The presentation is going to be very interactive today. My goal is to keep you engaged. Some of what I ask you to do is going to seem a little bit silly or unusual at certain points, but please bear with me because I promise you that these strange things that I ask you to do, they're really going to improve your ability to remember just about anything at all. Memory skills are fundamental to learning and the acquisition of knowledge. When you learn simple strategies that make it easier to retain and recall information, it's going to have a profound positive impact on multiple areas of your life. We're going to get started with a warm-up visualization exercise. I'd like for you all, if it's safe to do so, where you're attending this, to please close your eyes, and with your eyes closed, I'd like for you to do your best to simply try to picture what I described to you. I want for you to imagine yourself, picture yourself in your current residence. You are in the living room area of your residence, and you see there, standing behind podiums, looking as if they are about to engage in a debate, you see Brad Pitt, that famous actor, and standing behind another podium is The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, also known as The Rock. So you have these two movie stars in the middle of your living room, looking as if they are about to engage in a debate, standing behind podiums, and rather than ask any questions, you decide to just hang back and observe what's going on, all right? So I want you to just see this in your mind happening. They begin to debate each other, and the debate is becoming more and more heated between The Rock and Brad Pitt. And at one point, you can see The Rock become visibly upset at something that Brad Pitt says. So he reaches behind his podium to pull out a pie, takes the pie, throws it at Brad Pitt, splat. It hits him in the face. You can see pie dripping off of Pitt's face. He is not happy about this at all, so he now reaches behind his podium, believe it or not, to also pull out a pie, takes it, throws it at The Rock, splat, hits him in the face. You can see pie dripping off The Rock now. What started off as a debate has now turned into a full-blown pie fight. And these actors, movie stars are continuously throwing pies at each other, pies splattering everywhere. You can worry about who's going to clean up the living room later. Just try to see this in your mind to the best of your ability. You're smiling and giggling during this opening exercise. It's a good sign. Please just have fun with this. So you see this pie fight happening between these two movie stars. At this point, you're primarily experiencing images, right? Imagery is running through your head. What I'd like you to do now is attempt to involve even more senses as you experience this scenario happening. In addition to seeing it happen, I want for you to imagine that you can hear it happen as well. You can hear the pie as it's splattering on The Rock and Brad Pitt. I want for you to stretch your imagination a bit further. And in addition to seeing this and hearing it, I want for you to imagine that you can smell the pie. Do your best to imagine what that pie might smell like. Let's go even further with this. Imagine that you walk up to one of those movie stars and you take some of the pie off of their face. You feel it in your hands. Maybe it feels sort of sticky. Go ahead now, even put some of that pie in your mouth. Go ahead and taste the pie. Hopefully it's tasting pretty good to you. Although a lot of people tell me that it tastes like actor or movie star at this point. All right, if you did have your eyes closed, go ahead and open them. That's the end of the opening exercise, warm-up visualization exercise. A lot of people find that to be fun to go through. Everybody finds it to be pretty easy to complete that. But what does that have to do, that strange scenario there that I had you imagine happening in your mind, what does that have to do with improving your ability to retain and recall information? Things like names to get more out of networking, presentations to be a more effective and persuasive speaker, information from trainings like this one and future professional development. Well, actually, that exercise has a lot to do with all of that, and I'm going to explain why that is. During that exercise, I had you use your visualization ability, and your visual memory is incredibly powerful. An example that I like to give is that we have all at some point in our life ran into someone that we may have met them years ago, years in the past. Oftentimes, as soon as we see them, we remember their face. We know that we've met them somewhere before, but a lot of times we can't seem to remember the name, right? Pretty common experience. Another scenario that I think many of us can relate to, let's say you go to a party and you're meeting a lot of new people. 2 weeks after the party is over, you're talking with one of your friends that was also there, and your friend describes someone to you from the party. Your friend says, hey, remember that attorney that we met a couple of weeks ago at that event? He's also a member of the golf club. As your friend is describing the person, a lot of times you can picture exactly who they're talking about. You may even be able to pull up in your mind what the person was wearing at the party when you met them. And your friend can obviously picture who they're describing to you, but a lot of times neither one of you can manage to remember the person's name, and it's pretty frustrating. A third and final example related to this: how many times have you been talking to a friend or family member describing an actor from a TV show or movie crystal clear in your mind? You can see the actor, your friend or family member can also picture who you're talking about, but neither one of you can come up with the name. Again, it's a frustrating situation. Those three examples that I just went over, I think, illustrate pretty well that when it comes to dealing with people, we tend to be pretty good at remembering people's faces. We can call to mind what someone looks like, but we're not nearly as good at remembering people's names. Now, when you think about it, this makes sense because when we interact with people in various ways, we actually see their face. It's recorded into our visual memory, right? But the name is something more abstract to the brain. So one way that you can become so much better at remembering names is to turn the names into powerful visuals. So if I meet someone named Mike, sometimes I picture a microphone. If I meet someone named Alice, sometimes I picture a white rabbit because that reminds me of Alice in Wonderland. It may seem a little bit silly, but it's actually very powerful and effective. That is part of how I will open presentations at association conferences, corporate events all over the world with naming hundreds of people in the audience after hearing each name just one time. Visuals are very powerful. I'm going to get into names in more detail toward the end of today's presentation. But for now, I want for you to note just the power of coming up with a visual representation of what you want to remember. It makes it easier to retain and recall that information later on. The second principle that I'd like for you to take away from that opening exercise with Brad Pitt and The Rock beyond visuals, the next thing I had you do is get more and more senses involved, right? As you do that, you will be activating more and more areas of your brain, and you're building more and more connections in your mind to the information, making it easier to retrieve it when you need it later. So I starred in an episode of PBS's Nova Science. The episode that I starred in was titled How Smart Can We Get? Or it might be easier just to Google my name, Chester Santos, and PBS. If you do check it out, you can watch it for free on the PBS website. If you check it out, you're going to see me on there performing some pretty crazy memory feats. Then they had me train David Pogue, who some people might know from the New York Times and CBS News. He's a correspondent for the technology industry. They had me train him, and he was able to perform some pretty cool memory feats. They then had some brain scientists, neuroscientists come on the show and explain to people watching at home on TV, okay, how was Chester able to pull off those memory feats? How was David Pogue able to do it with just a little bit of training from Chester? And these brain scientists confirmed because with the memory techniques that I've mastered over the years and that you're going to learn a little bit about on the webinar today, what's happening with these techniques is we're recruiting extra areas of the brain to help us, areas of the brain that most people would never use. We're activating these extra areas, and part of this is learning to use more senses. So to quickly summarize that point, simply the more senses you involve in the encoding process when trying to get things into memory, the more of your brain is used, the easier it becomes to remember. The third and final principle that I'd like for you to take away from that opening exercise with the movie stars is that in addition to seeing it happen and then having you get more and more senses involved, I made the entire scenario pretty weird, right? You would never expect to see that happening in the middle of your living room, this pie fight with the famous movie stars. I had you do that because I want for you to learn today to take advantage of the psychological aspect of human memory. And that is all of us, with putting forth little to no effort at all, we tend to remember things that catch us by surprise, that are strange, unusual, extraordinary in some way. If this were to happen right now, okay, wherever you're at, if an elephant were to crash into the room that you're in, and if it were to start to spray water all over you with its trunk at this moment, if that actually happened right now, I can promise you that you would remember that for decades, maybe even for the rest of your life, without any effort on your part to commit it to memory. 30 years from now, you might be telling the story, okay, so you're never going to believe this. One afternoon, I was on a webinar by UST Education put on there. The speaker was a memory guy. It was unbelievable. These elephants crashed into the room, started to spray water on me while I was attended. It was so crazy. It could be stuck there forever without you really trying to commit that to memory. To this day, scientists still don't fully understand how that works in the brain, how it is that sometimes in one instant, something will go straight into long-term memory, stay there forever, whereas other times we might spend weeks, months trying to drill important processes, procedures, foreign language vocabulary, training material, etc. And it's tough. It can be tough. Although it isn't fully understood, this psychological aspect to human memory, we just have to realize there is this aspect to how our mind works. We can then harness it and apply it to things that would be very useful to remember, training material, names for networking, and foreign language vocabulary, so much more. There are limitless applications, really, when you're able to develop your memory skills. We're now going to start to put this into practice. I covered really just 3 overarching principles so far: visuals, from there, additional senses, and third, while you're doing this, make everything weird and unusual. When we put this into practice right away, instantly, it becomes easier to remember really anything. I'm going to have you try to apply this now. You're all going to commit to memory the following word list. It's going to be monkey, iron, rope, kite, house, paper, shoe, worm, envelope, pencil, river, rock, tree, cheese, and dollar. If I could get a volunteer now to write those out from memory. Just kidding. A lot of times when I have live audiences in person, I can see the looks on people's faces. At this point in the presentation, people are usually looking at me like I'm a little bit crazy. They think there's no way they'll be able to commit all of that to memory, not unless I give you a lot of time to do it. But in fact, you're all going to have the entire random list of words committed to memory forwards and backwards with just about 2 or 3 minutes of study time. That's it. And with no further review, I get people weeks, months after a presentation writing me emails telling me they just can't believe that they still remember all of the words forwards and backwards, or writing me messages on LinkedIn. By the way, if you end up really enjoying this presentation today, feel free to take a screenshot, maybe tag myself and USTA Education on LinkedIn. That would be really cool if you all would do that, if you find today's presentation useful and enjoyable. You're going to have these words down in about 3 minutes by simply relaxing, all right? Just relax and listen to what I described to you, just as you did in the opening exercise with Brad Pitt and The Rock. The same thing. I'm going to describe something to you, see and experience it happening in your mind. Again, if you're smiling and giggling over the next few minutes, it's a good sign you're going to remember all of the words, all right? The first word was monkey, so I want for you all just to visualize with your eyes opened or closed, whatever's more comfortable for you in terms of visualization at this point. See this monkey dancing around. It's making monkey noises. Whatever a monkey would sound like. I'm working on my monkey impression. But the point here is to see and hear that monkey. The monkey now picks up a gigantic iron, maybe like you would iron your clothes with, all right? It's dancing around with this giant iron. And the iron starts to fall, but a rope attaches itself to the iron. I want for you to even feel that rope, really interact with it. Maybe it feels sort of rough. All right. Again, you're just experiencing this like an interactive movie or cartoon playing in your head right now. You're feeling the rope. You look up the rope and you see that the other end of the rope is attached to a kite. This kite is flying around in the air. Maybe you reach up and try and touch that kite, but it's just out of your reach. See that kite. The kite now crashes into the side of a house. Picture that. The kite flies in, crashes into this house. The house, you notice, is completely covered in paper. For some weird reason, it's totally covered in paper. The next word I had given you was paper. Out of nowhere now, a shoe appears and it starts to walk all over the paper. Maybe it's messing up the paper as it's walking on it. See that shoe. The shoe smells pretty badly, so you decide to investigate and see why. You look inside of the shoe and you find a smelly worm crawling around inside of that shoe. I want for you to smell and see that worm. The worm now jumps out of the shoe and into an envelope. Maybe it's going to mail itself or something. I don't know, but Envelope is the next word I had given you. So see the worm go into the envelope. Out of nowhere, a pencil appears and it starts to write all over the envelope. Maybe it's addressing it as it's writing on it. Maybe it's addressing it. See the pencil? The pencil now jumps into a river and there's a huge splash like you would never expect to see when that little pencil hits the river. River was the next word. See that splash of the river. The river, you notice, is splashing up against a rock, a giant rock. See that? The next word I had given you was rock. Picture that in your mind. Again, just have fun with this. The rock flies out of the river now and crashes into a tree. See that? This tree is growing cheese. You probably haven't seen a tree like that before. This one is growing cheese. And out of the cheese shoots a dollar. A dollar shoots right out of the cheese. I really want you to see that dollar coming out. Picture that. The last word that I had given you was dollar. All right. Some of you actually may already have this down, but I'm going to run through this again very quickly in about 30 seconds. And your job is to simply replay through this little story that you've created in your mind. So we have the monkey. All right. The monkey is dancing around with, I want you to picture that iron. When the iron started to fall, what attached itself? See and feel that rope. You look up the rope, the other end was attached to a kite. Picture that kite, all right? The kite crashed into a house. See it smash into the house. The house was covered in something. What was it covered in? It was covered in paper. I want you to see that paper. What was walking around on top of that paper? It was a shoe. Okay, it was a shoe. There was something smelly inside. I want you to see that worm. The worm then jumped into an envelope. Really see it go into the envelope. What was writing on the envelope? Something was writing on it. It was a pencil. See that pencil? The pencil jumped into a river. See it crash into the river, splash into the river. The river was splashing against the giant rock. That rock crashed into the tree. What was that tree growing? I want you to picture the cheese. And what came out? A dollar. I really want you to see the dollar come out of there. That was the last word. Now, it should be fairly easy to simply replay through that story in your mind. Each major object that you encounter in the story is going to give you the next random word. I see that some people were already writing that out in the chat. I'm going to give you just about 2 minutes or so. Please participate in the exercise if you can. Write your answer out in the chat, all 15 random words from memory by just simply playing through the story. Just do your best. And then after about 2 minutes or so, we'll have Nicole read out someone's name and then their answer. Even if you aren't brave enough to write it out in the chat, at a minimum, please go through this and see if you can recall all of the words by going through the story. I want for you to try this new approach in terms of memory. And again, I'm going to go over so many practical applications, business applications for everything that we end up doing today. So you've got a couple of minutes to write these out, guys. All right. If we could have Nicole please just read out a few random answers that we've received.
I am checking them as they come in, and very consistently, everybody is getting all of them. We're seeing monkey, iron, rope, kite, house, paper, shoe, worm, envelope, pencil, river, rock, tree, cheese, dollar. And that's Iman's, but I think everybody's getting all of them, to be honest.
Cool. Awesome. Great job, everyone. That actually, before I move on, let me get a brave volunteer or two. Try to write those out in the chat if you can backwards, and I'll give you about 1 to 2 minutes. Try now to write those out in reverse from memory. All you would do is go through the story backwards, the story in reverse, and it should be fairly easy to recall those words even backwards. So let me give you just about a minute or two, and so let's see if we get any brave volunteers to do that. And Nicole, could you read off one of those?
Sure, let's go with Christy. She was in first. Dollar, cheese, tree, rock, river, pencil, envelope, worm, shoe, paper, house, kite, rope, iron, monkey.
Perfect. Great job. And I'm sure all of those answers that came in were perfect as well or close to it. If you are missing one or two items, you will simply run through the story again 1 or 2 more times and it will really lock it in. Now, this technique that you've all learned is called the story method. It is just one of many techniques that memory champions like myself use to pull off what at first seemed like crazy memory feats. So they've had me on a lot of different TV shows over the years, Science Channel, Discovery Channel, a bunch of different news programs. Most recently was BBC World News. They'll have me come on, perform what seems like a memory feat, and then give tips for viewers at home as to how they can improve their own ability to remember. I want to make it very clear today that there's nothing different about my brain compared to anyone else's. I've simply learned these types of techniques that are powerful and effective, and I've put in a little bit of training and practice. And the training and practice can actually be a lot of fun. I hope that you all are starting to see that already today. Now, this technique, the story method, doesn't apply to just random words. There are some very practical applications. One thing that you could apply it to is giving a speech or presentation, minimizing the amount of notes that you use so that you will be able to maintain eye contact with your audience and be a more effective and persuasive speaker. So I have been a speaker at some huge events over the years. Even there have been some Nobel Prize winners. At one event that I was a speaker at, the one of the former Nobel Prize winners in physics was a speaker. There's a lot of times famous professors from various universities around the United States. And although they are a world-class expert in their field, sometimes the audience feedback, the scores on the review cards are not necessarily the best because the presentation was, here's slide number 1 on my research, charts and graphs. Here's slide number 2 on my research, a bunch of charts and graphs, and people start to actually fall asleep. Another issue is a lot of times a speaker will be speaking, giving their presentation. There's something on the slideshow, and people are reading the charts and graphs or reading what's on the slide, and then they're not registering. They're not actually retaining what is being spoken at that time, right? So there's a bit of a distraction. Do I listen to the speaker? Am I supposed to be reading what's on the slide? that can be an issue as well. So definitely, I think it's going to be powerful if you can at least minimize the amount of notes, minimize slides perhaps, and definitely try to stick to visuals if you are using a lot of slides. How do you apply this to a speech? Let's say I were going to give a talk about healthcare in the US, always a hot topic for discussion. Maybe my first image is going to simply be a stethoscope that the doctor uses to check your heartbeat, right? Stethoscope is just going to tell me the broad topic for discussion for today is healthcare. First talking point, maybe high cost of healthcare in the US. So shooting out of the stethoscope, I see a bunch of $100 bills. That reminds me that that's the next important point that I need to get across to the audience. Maybe the next thing that I might want to cover in the presentation is that undercurrent healthcare programs. And sometimes in order to get things covered, we need to find a way to navigate through or cut through a lot of red tape. So maybe wrapping itself around the $100 bills is a bunch of red tape. So I think that should give you an idea of how to apply this to minimizing the amount of notes that you use when giving a presentation. You'll simply research the topic, create an outline of all of the major points and subpoints. Then you can build an interesting little story to help guide you, okay? This could also be applied to meeting with a client or potential client. You do some research up front. When you meet with them, you're able to say, here are 5 to 10 initiatives that my association is working on or my organization that I think would be very valuable for what you all are doing. Here are 5 to 10 things that I learned about your competitors and how our services can help you address these issues. When you're able to do that, it is so impressive, especially in today's business world, in which, if we're honest with ourselves, the average business professional would have a lot of difficulty with even doing this sort of thing that I described. 5 to 10 key points as to why you're the perfect service, 5 to 10 key points as to what your competitor is doing. Why? Because everyone is so dependent upon AI, other digital technologies. We're really using our ability to remember things, and even preparing for a short meeting sometimes can be very difficult if you can't rely on reading things off of ChatGPT or reading things off of your notes. So when you're able to demonstrate your knowledge and expertise that you just really know your stuff, it's very impressive. A little bit goes a long way in terms of memory skills development, especially I would say in today's business world. Now I'm going to veer off a little bit into general benefits, and then I'm going to get into some specific applications again, and we're going to go through at least one more fun and interactive exercise. But my hope is that after today's presentation, you're going to go out there and use your memory a little bit more, because you realize it can be fun to do so, and it isn't as difficult as you may have previously thought. If you use your memory over time, your memory is going to get better, even independent of using any sort of memory technique, simply because you're forcing your brain to go through that process of putting things into memory, retrieving it from memory, putting things into memory, retrieving it from memory. The more you force your brain to go through a particular function, perform a particular function over and over, the more it signals to your brain, hey, this is something important that I need to be able to do. So your brain finds a way to make itself better at doing it. The brain is very trainable. There was a segment on a science program about a guy who was in an unfortunate accident, and a pole went through an area of his brain. He completely lost the ability to perform many different functions. But what happened is, with rehabilitation and training, the brain started to rewire itself. Areas of the brain that in most people would have nothing to do with performing those functions, they started to take over, and he did regain many lost abilities. Now, he didn't make a 100% recovery, but he did regain many lost abilities due to a rewiring of the brain. Your brain is very trainable. Brain plasticity has been a hot topic in the last 10 years or so. Brain scientists have discovered that you can build new neural connections, even build new brain cells throughout your lifetime if you do exercise, work out your brain. Now, the opposite is also true. If you never have your brain perform a particular function, if you're always writing everything down, if you're always entering things into electronic devices, what you're saying to your brain on a daily basis is, hey, I don't need to remember anymore. I've got ChatGPT. I've got these other things to remember things for me. So what's going to happen, unfortunately, is you will lose that ability over time because you're saying to your brain every day, you don't need to remember. It will reach a point, and it does for some people, where it's a little bit scary what you're not able to remember at critical moments. The use it or lose it principle does apply to human memory. One quick example, phone numbers. We all used to be able to remember the phone numbers of friends, family members. I remember growing up, my parents would give me numbers that I should know in case of an emergency, right? We could all do that. But nowadays, you give somebody one phone number and they feel paralyzed in their ability to remember one number. It's getting so bad that you have people out there today that don't even know their own phone number. Really, you ask them and they're like, oh, here it is. There it is. Pull it up on their phone. You can write it down. They're not sure what their own phone number it is. It's a good example of the use it or lose it principle. Navigation is another thing. You have people that have been driving in a city for 5+ years, and if something's wrong with a network connection in that area or something's wrong with the app, they'll have to pull over, restart the phone, hope that the issue resolves itself, or they won't even be able to navigate to what should be well-known places after driving in a city for 5+ years. It's just another example of what happens when you turn off your brain completely and you're maybe a little bit too dependent on technology. Believe it or not, I'm a speaker a lot of times at tech conferences, which people wouldn't guess. And I always encourage people, use technology as much as possible when it can aid you, help you to be more productive. But let's also use our brains as well. Be wary of completely turning off your brain. So in the case of phone numbers, I will try to commit all the numbers to memory that I can. And when I need to call someone, first rely on my memory. Now, if I didn't get enough sleep or very stressed out or I'm pressed for some reason, I need to call very quickly, only in that case would I use the auto dial from the address book as a last resort. But I try to use my memory. That's just a very good way that all of us can exercise our memories on a daily basis. Family members, friends, colleagues that you call often, commit those numbers to memory and then start trying to dial them from memory. It's good daily memory exercise. Now, I want to hit on this concept that people think that if you're older in age, you're going to have a memory worse than someone younger in age, and that's just how things are. I want to try to counteract that thinking a little bit. I used to, pre-COVID, teach a one-day memory training workshop in the San Francisco Bay Area. People from all over the United States would fly out and attend. It was one of the only workshops like it in the entire world. Now I'm much more focused on online training and online memory school. You'll probably be sent out a little bit of info if you want follow-up resources after this. But I had all age ranges in the workshop, ages 8 through people in their 90s. I had a woman one weekend in the workshop, 85 years old. She didn't make one mistake the whole day. Everybody was amazed with her. I'm amazed with her. We're Facebook friends now, and I see her post. If she's not attending a different class, she's attending maybe an art function. She's clearly made it a point to keep herself mentally stimulated throughout her life. And I feel that has to be at least part of how she's staying so razor sharp, even into her mid-80s. So working out your brain, you can keep it sharp at any age. Second quick example, I represented the United States in the World Memory Championship after I won the United States Memory Championship. There was a guy there in his late 60s, so decades older than me. This guy kicked my butt really badly in the World Memory Championship. He actually memorized the entire dictionary, Advanced Learners Edition, in English and Chinese. And he did a demonstration for people in the audience. They would just call, and for people from the media that were there filming, they would just call out a random word, and he, from memory, could tell you the page, the row, the column, everything. And he could do the reverse. He's known as the walking dictionary, Dr. Yip Sway Choi from Malaysia. These are the types of guys you get over at the World Memory Championship. It's pretty intense. But it shows even in your late 60s, later in your years, you can have a razor sharp memory, but he is constantly working on his memory at least a few times a week. So any age, you can have a sharp memory. Another benefit of this type of training is going to be improved visualization ability. You're going to find that over time, if you stick to all of this, you're going to be able to create these images that I'm talking about much more quickly and see the imagery more clearly in your mind. Visualization ability has been linked in many studies to more than memory. It's been linked to overall intelligence. In fact, if you have the ability, when you need to digest some very complex new information, if you have the ability to picture it, break it down into a simple series of images, it improves your ability to understand the information as well. Visualization, very important. You'll develop that ability with this type of memory training. This is also really good exercise in creativity and imagination, coming up with these creative and imaginative stories. In addition, this is a really good workout for your brain overall, just a general brain exercise. Everybody is recommending a brain exercise program in addition to a physical exercise program. If you're unfortunately destined to develop Alzheimer's or another form of dementia down the line, there's no doctor, no researcher that can say, hey, just take these vitamins, just do these exercises, you're not going to get dementia. Nobody can say that. Nobody knows how to prevent it from happening. But what they do believe is that by engaging in rigorous brain exercise, you can build up what they're calling cognitive reserve. If you'd like to look that up later on, cognitive reserve is the terminology often used in the research. This basically means just building up some extra brain muscle to make you more resistant. You will have some extra years of mental clarity that you might not have had without that cognitive reserve. One of the best ways to build this up, they say, is to learn foreign languages. When you're learning foreign languages, you're building up so many extra brain connections. You're giving your brain an intense workout. Of course, learning languages becomes so much easier when you've developed your memory skills, because a large part of learning language is building up the vocabulary. What's the word for man, woman, computer, and so on, right? So brain exercise, another benefit of all of this. I want to get into another specific application that you may not have thought of that will help to give you or really keep your advantage in terms of creativity over AI. So I'm going to guide you through an exercise here. I'm just going to do a quick time check because I know I probably need to get to the Q&A here. Okay, yeah. So I've got enough time, I think, to go through this exercise, give you some tips for names, so you'll get more out of networking at events, and then we'll take Q&A until Nicole says that I'm out of time. I'm going to ask you to visualize again here for about a minute or two with your eyes opened or closed, whatever's more comfortable for you in terms of visualization. We're going to try to add to your knowledge bank at first without you realizing it. So I want for you all to picture some gigantic machines, all right, some giant machines. These giant machines are smashing up a huge pile of gold and silver. These giant machines are smashing up a huge pile of gold and silver. To see that happening as best you can with your eyes opened or closed. And again, relax, have fun with this. The giant machines are smashing up a huge pile of gold and silver, and rising up out of the gold and silver, you see a bunch of vehicles, whatever type of vehicles you would like to picture. Shooting out of the vehicles, you see medicine, maybe pill bottles, syringes, but medicine is what I want you to picture shooting out of the vehicles. And exploding out of the medicine, oil. Probably black petroleum oil would be the easiest to picture. Oil is exploding out of the medicine. I'm going to run through this again very quickly. We've got these giant machines. Just see them smashing up gold and silver, rising up out of the gold and silver. You see vehicles. Coming out of the vehicles is shooting a bunch of medicine, and exploding out of the medicine, oil. One last time for good measure, you've got those giant machines smashing up the gold and silver. Rising up out of the gold and silver, you see vehicles. Coming out of that, you can picture medicine, and exploding out of the medicine, oil. Go ahead and take about a minute or so. Write those out into the chat, please. And we will have then Nicole maybe just read off one answer as we're getting low on time. And then I'll explain what you've added to your knowledge bank, and then get into some applications as to why you want to continuously add to your knowledge as much as possible. All right, Nicole, if I could have you just read one of those off, please. Thank you.
Sure, Abby came in first, so we'll go with hers. Machines, gold and silver, vehicles, medicine, and oil.
Great job. And I saw the answers popping up on my screen. They all seem to be 100% or close to it. Again, you've all committed there to memory, probably without realizing it. You now all know the top 5 exports of the UK. So if you were to look this up, you're going to find that the UK's top exports are actually machinery, precious metals, vehicles, pharmaceuticals, and oil. So you start to realize a little bit more how the image doesn't perfectly need to match what you're trying to remember. You're just building a mental note card or a mental cue card. I encourage you that if you can, at least once per month, you could even use this simple concept that you've learned on today's webinar. Try to commit to memory some type of information from your field or just something that interests you personally related to a hobby, perhaps. Try to add to your knowledge bank because this fuels human creativity. I want to give you an example that will hopefully further clarify this concept. Perhaps an overly simplistic example, but I think it's going to really get the point across. So let's imagine that you go on a tropical vacation, all right? And you have there on this vacation for the first time in your life, you're trying maracuya. Maracuya is a fruit that you'll find in tropical locations. And upon tasting this fruit, you're thinking to yourself, wow, this is so cool. This is an unusual flavor. It's delicious. I haven't had this before. All right. And while you're experiencing this and these thoughts are just popping in your head, suddenly it pops in your head, you know what? This might be delicious in a pie. I might make a maracuya pie shop, maracuya pie, and I could open up a maracuya pie shop or maybe start to create maracuya pastries. They don't have that in my city where I live. This would be unique. It might be very popular. That whole line of thinking that started to pop in your head just upon tasting that new fruit, that was actually wholly dependent upon the fact that when you were tasting the maracuya, you already had stored in your knowledge bank knowledge of what a pie is. Okay, I know that sounds a little bit out there, but I'm just wanting to illustrate that if you had that gap in your knowledge, if you didn't know what a pie was, it would be impossible for your brain to produce that particular idea, if that makes sense. So when you are limited in your knowledge, you're limited in the amount of ideas that your brain can produce as you're experiencing everyday life. The more knowledge that you possess, conversely, the more ideas, the more potential your brain has in terms of creativity. So you want to continuously add to your knowledge if you can, and you'll also note the way that that idea was produced were in ways that were uniquely human, right? It was based on the taste, right? Emotions that you were feeling. So to keep this creative advantage that we do have over AI, we can produce ideas in which AI can't. You want to fuel your knowledge. And what we're learning on today's webinar can help you with that. I want to give you some additional quick tips for names, and then I'm going to take questions. So we talked about visuals, a microphone for Mike, a white rabbit, Alice for Alice in Wonderland, to remind you of the name Alice. I would combine those visuals, if you can, with 4 simple steps. And that is, when you're meeting somebody, simply repeat their name and shake their hand if you can. Just nice to meet, if you're meeting someone named John, nice to meet you, John. Pleased to meet you, John. Get into that habit. It seems a little bit obvious, but a lot of times when we are introduced to someone, our mind is on what we're going to eat for dinner later. What's the next conference session? We don't pay attention to the name. That first step that I'm giving you forces you to pay attention to the name for at least 1 second. That's the only way you could repeat it back to the person. Eventually, you're going to find that you're automatically doing it. It's your second nature. Step 2, early on in your interaction, ask a simple question using the name. So, John, how do you know Chester? Or, John, how long have you been with this organization? That's it. It's going to help prevent the name from going in one ear and out the other ear. Step 3, take a few seconds to think of a connection between the name and anything at all that you already know. John, maybe there's a character from a TV show or movie that you really like with that name. Maybe you have, I might think of my Uncle John. I have an uncle named John, all right? Thinking of a connection between the name and anything you already know is going to help it to stick really well in your mind. Step 4, whenever you leave the meeting, the party, whatever type of function it might be, try to say goodbye to people actually using their name. I hope to see you again sometime, John. That's going to go a long way toward helping you to remember more of those names the next time you see those people. And if at that point you've already forgotten the name, ask them again right then and there, because at that point, I think they're more likely to appreciate the fact that you care enough to remember their name for the next time you see them, right? So those steps right away, going through them, are going to improve your ability, and they're also forcing you to focus more on names. Then later you can try to combine that with the visuals, and then maybe even link the visual to something unique about their look. So if I'm meeting Mike and he's got cool looking hair, I might imagine the microphone getting tangled up in his hair. The next time I see him at the conference, I ask myself, what was unique to me about his look? Oh yeah, he's got pretty cool looking hair. And then I can right away see the microphone was getting tangled up. Maybe even I imagine that I had to go through the trouble of untangling it to use the microphone. That's really going to help you to remember people's names. I'm just about out of time, so I'm going to take questions until Nicole tells me that I can't take any more. Again, if you're enjoying the webinar, please maybe take a screenshot, tag myself on LinkedIn and UST Education. And I do hope that people will keep in touch with me. My follow-up materials will be sent out to you after the webinar. Let's take questions now.
While we wait to see if anybody drops a question, and there was one from earlier, Lisa would like to know, is typing things out as good as writing things out for memorizing?
So I would say either is perfectly fine, and just experiment with both and see what works best for you. But whether or not you're writing it down or typing things in, I would encourage you, as you're doing that, at the same time, try to also absorb the information as well. Read it multiple times, try to commit it to memory as well. Or you're typing out an outline, right? And then try to at least commit the key points to memory. So the danger, I encourage you, go ahead, write things down, type things out. But the only danger in that is if you're turning off your brain completely, it's another form of just outsourcing it to something else, right? So they did a study. There was research done in which they had a group of people watch TED Talks. One group was allowed to take notes the whole time during the TED Talks. The other group just sat there quietly watching. And when they were quizzed on material from the TED Talk later, the group that just sat there quietly watching completely outperformed the group that was sitting there taking notes the whole time. A similar study was done with people visiting a museum. So one group was allowed to take videos and snap pictures at the museum. The other group just had a great time, enjoyed all of the exhibits. That group that was not snapping pictures, not taking videos, they actually recalled a lot more than the group that was taking videos. The video group and picture group did poorly on recalling information from the museum.
So Nancy would like to know, can you use counting to double check memory? So for instance, counting the items in a list.
Definitely. Yeah. So if you know ahead of time, like one thing I would encourage you all to do if you've enjoyed today's webinar and you found the exercises to be fun is maybe once a week or twice a month at a bare minimum, you could print out random word lists from the internet, maybe 25, ask some sort of program to spit out 25 random words. You would know there's 25 and then try to commit them to memory using the story method. And then, yeah, definitely double check and count out, make sure that you have 25.
Adrian would like to know, do you have any tips on remembering numbers? For instance, do you associate each number with an image? For example, 1 equals 1 with a W, which equals a gold medal, 2 equals ballet tutu, etc.
Yeah, so you could do something like that. what I will say is all of the principles that we've covered today would apply, but there's an intermediate step that you would need in order for all of this to be more effective when memorizing numbers. For instance, in the United States Memory Championship, I memorized a 132-digit sequence forwards and backwards in 5 minutes. It's because I take the number and I turn it into a concrete image. Now, there are different ways to do that. One of the best ways is the phonetic alphabet system or the major system. You could learn that on my memory school. Again, I think they're going to send out information to you guys as a follow-up resource. But a simpler way but not as effective would be like 1 bun, 2 shoe, 3 tree, 4 door. So it's something called the number rhyme, which helps you to get an image. So 1 bun, you can visualize a bun. 2 shoe, you could visualize a shoe. So that's another option for you. So there's an intermediate step of coming up with that concrete, memorable image for the number.